We've already seen, by the way, how populist authoritarian leaders have used migrants as scapegoats and have fanned the fires of xenophobia to fuel their own rise to power. And power seeking is what this is all about. Our Constitution, written by our founders, is intended to protect us against a threat identical to Donald Trump, someone who seeks power at all costs to get more power. I understand very well why it is wrong to compare Adolf Hitler's Third Reich to any other movement. It was uniquely evil, full stop. I get it. But there are important lessons from the history of that emergent evil, and here is one that I regard as essential. In the immediate aftermath of World War II, a small group of philosophers who had escaped Hitler's murderous regime returned to Germany and performed a kind of moral autopsy on the Third Reich. Theodor Adorno, who wrote that the first step in that nation's descent into hell was, and I quote, the conversion of all questions of truth into questions of power. He described how the Nazis, and I quote again, attacked the very heart of the distinction between true and false, end quote. The Trump administration is insisting on trying to create their own preferred version of reality. They say Ukraine attacked Russia instead of the other way around, and expect us to believe it. At home, they attack heroes who have defended our nation in war and against cyber attacks as traitors.
Well, Judge Boasberg here in the federal district court in D.C. did find that the administration actively and deliberately defied his order to turn around the planes that were in the skies, in the air, when he issued his directive on March 15 to turn around deportation flights carrying people processed under the Alien Enemies Act. And now we know that this appellate court has stayed his order, but only on administrative grounds, Weija. And so that means that order could very well take effect later this week or in the near future. If that does happen, the administration will face two options. It can try to rectify its alleged violation of that court order by retaking custody of the detainees sent to that mega prison in El Salvador, or it could very well find itself finding itself in a criminal contempt and a criminal prosecution referral by Judge Boasberg. The open question is what happens if the judge issues that criminal referral, because of course that would be handled by the Justice Department, and I think it's unlikely that the Trump administration will prosecute its own officials for this alleged violation of a court ruling.
Yeah, Attorney General Pam Bondi has explicitly said that she will not be bringing those men back.
The Supreme Court has unanimously ruled against the Trump administration in a case regarding a Maryland man that the administration wrongfully arrested and deported to an El Salvador mega prison last month. His name is Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The White House admitted in court that Garcia's deportation was a result of an administrative error. Because, you see, back in 2019, Donald Trump was president during that time, he got protected immigration status, which meant he had an active order that he could not be removed or deported. And yet, he was rounded up by the Trump administration anyway, and after they admitted to it in court, they refused to do anything about it. He's in an El Salvador supermax. You'll never hear from him again. What do you want from us? Well, the Supreme Court weighed in unanimously. They now say that a district court, which previously ruled in this case, can indeed instruct the Trump administration to facilitate Garcia's return home. It will not be immediate, but the court says the White House has to start taking those steps.
That issue was raised with the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador.
Was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve, was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0.
In our favor.
In our favor.
Garcia is doing well and that he should stay where he is.
No, in fact, the El Salvadorian government tried really hard not to let me see him. But I think they realized that that was not a good look at the end of the day. I had press conferences in El Salvador with local press and made the point that El Salvador was violating international law by not allowing anyone to reach him, not his wife, not his lawyers, nobody. They realized that was a bad look. So I'm glad I met him. That was the purpose of my visit. They go to great lengths to deceive people. If you look at the photos when I first sat down and the ones at the end, you can see that that was all staged. They're trying to create the impression that, you know, this is a guy in paradise, when in fact he's been in one of the most notorious prisons in the world.
Well, the Trump administration has made abundantly clear that they have no intention of bringing him back to the United States. And in fact, the official White House account posted a picture that says exactly that based on their own edits. Is it fair to say that Abrego Garcia will remain in El Salvador as long as Trump is president, or unless Trump changes his mind?
No, because the Supreme Court of the United States and the other courts have said that the administration has to facilitate his return. As of right now, they are in defiance of that court order. They're not doing anything. I want to be really clear. This is not a case about just one man whose constitutional rights are being ignored and disrespected. Because when you trample on the constitutional rights of one man, as the courts have all said is happening in this case, you threaten the constitutional rights of every American. I would think that conservatives and libertarians would recoil at the idea that someone has lost his liberty without due process.
Can a president use the dubious invocation of a 200-year-old law, the Alien Enemies Act, which has only been used previously in wartime, to justify basically snatching anyone off the streets and then quickly shipping them off to a foreign prison where they will never be heard from again with zero due process? None. Now, to my mind, and the minds of, I think, many legal observers, the answer to that question has always been flatly no. If the Constitution protects against anything, it protects against that. But it has been a matter of whether or not this 6-3 conservative Supreme Court would acknowledge that reality. It is very, very striking. There were no dissents here. That is not very common from this court when it comes to high-stakes issue having to do with paying deference to Donald Trump.
A federal appeals court said Thursday that the Trump administration's assertions in the case of a Maryland man who it admitted was mistakenly deported to El Salvador should be shocking to all Americans, and made an appeal to the executive branch to vindicate the importance of the rule of law. The brief, unanimous opinion, authored by Judge Harvey Wilkinson of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, rejected a request from the Trump administration to pause a district judge's order that required it to facilitate the release of Garcia, a 29-year-old who lives in Maryland, from Salvadoran custody, and explain the steps it has taken to return him to the U.S.